All right, and welcome back to the Paisan Sports podcast. It has been a very busy weekend in the realm of sports, so here we are to talk about it. Dante DePlacido, joined as always by Zach Deal.
Yes, sir. How we doing, everybody? How you doing, Dante?
Not bad, not bad. I was at Xfinity Live last night to watch night 2 of Wrestlemania. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But the main thing I witnessed while I was there at Xfinity was one heck of a Sixers game, winning it in double overtime on the heels of a Tyrese Maxey 52-point performance.
Yes, sir. It was very impressive. There was also timely shots by Nicholas Batum, and it was really a team effort outside of Tyrese Maxey. 52 points that really led the team, but there was a lot of contributions from all the role players. So beating a team like that, obviously you didn't want to lose that game because earlier in that day the Heat had lost, so you could have upped them in the standings and getting closer to possibly landing that 6th seed. So Dante's doing some decorating on his walls. But yeah, it was a huge win yesterday, and to overcome a player like Victor Wembanyama, who's probably not going to have too many more losing teams that he plays on throughout his career because he's already phenomenal and absolutely ridiculous of a player. But Tyrese Maxey's taken over. Joel Embiid didn't play because of the back-to-back, and the last time we were on this podcast, we were kind of talking about when Joel Embiid may come back. And it ended up being Tuesday versus the Thunder, and they ended up winning, even though the Thunder were short their star player SGA. The Sixers ended up winning, and they look like they're finally hitting stride. It was good to see a game when Joel didn't play since he had come back, and to see them win that game, because usually coming down to the wire like that and having to switch between having Joel Embiid the night before and then not having him for this game and how long that game lasted, and the matchup between Victor Wembanyama, who he had that ridiculous game against earlier this season, but the Sixers played phenomenal yesterday.
Yeah, and this is now the second 76er to reach their career high against the Victor Wembanyama-led defense, which some people are putting a little more stock into it than they should. I mean, I'm watching the game last night, and I'm just like watching it thinking, how are you even supposed to score in the paint while Victor Wembanyama is on the court? And Tyrese Maxey, he didn't even make it look easy, but he got it done. I mean, there were times he went into the paint and either he put up a really tough floater above him or he kind of quickly exploded to the rim, maybe put it up with his offhand to avoid Wembanyama, but it looks tough out there when he's on the court. And like you said, some timely shots by Nico Batum. He's the kind of guy where that's like the veteran player who's going to play defense and hit threes for you in the playoffs. Where I
He was
really
guarding Wemby last night too. That was the most impressive thing. Is they were playing small ball, and he was out there at the 5 guarding Wemby
yeah
and doing a
after
phenomenal job on him.
After Paul Reed fouled out, I thought for sure they'd put in Mo Bamba to play the center position, but they I forget if they already had KJ Martin in or if they already had Ricky Council in, and then they put in either one and ran Wembanyama at the 5. And ran Nico Batum at the 5, but both Ricky Council and KJ Martin really did a phenomenal job. And shout out Ricky Council when he drove into the lane and kicked it out to Nico Batum.
Oh, that was a phenomenal pass. That was one of the best passes I've seen all year from any basketball player. And the threat of him, he's really good inside the paint and just getting to the foul line and making crucial free throws like he did yesterday. And it's starting to look like a cast of guys that could be led by Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey and just have to really feed off that energy. They also were without Tobias Harris yesterday too, even though he obviously
that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
And that might be a blessing in disguise at this point in time. But I mean, in reality,
it's not even
obviously,
in disguise. I mean, and the thing too is like I wish we could just sit Tobias for the rest of the year, including the playoffs. But
They just
unfortunately,
like play a really small style and have to go a lot deeper into the lineup when they don't have Tobias Harris because he's really the only like true four besides Batum out there. And then if they get into foul trouble like they did without Joel Embiid and Paul Reed fouls out, then now you get stuck in a position where Batum has to guard Wembanyama, even though he did a phenomenal job with it. I think Wemby could have been a little bit more aggressive too in the fourth quarter. He was shooting threes. I mean, I think he started the quarter 3 for 3 from deep and had 9 points, but he wasn't really driving the paint and utilizing that post matchup mismatch that he had. But if we're looking at the Sixers as a whole, in the standings right now, they jumped the Heat from the Heat losing yesterday.
which
So
unfortunately they lost to, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Pacers, or maybe it was somebody
yeah, they
else.
were playing each other. The Pacers and the Heat were playing
Yeah,
each other. So the Pacers
yeah.
are
So,
1 game up on the Sixers for the 6th seed in the East,
which is
and
what we
which
need.
that
We
team would
need that
not have to
six
play in the
seed
play-in tournament.
because not only do you avoid the play-in tournament if you get the sixth seed. But as it stands right now, you play the Orlando Magic in round one. Now, not to discredit the Orlando Magic, but with Joel Embiid on the court, a series against the Magic, I mean, as good as the Magic have been this season, they're a young team, they're inexperienced, and Joel Embiid, he's just going to eat that team for lunch. So the sixth seed
They are
would
a
be.
deep team. They don't really scare me as a matchup wise because I do feel like the top end talent that the Sixers have is just better than what the Magic can offer and the contributions they're going to get from the role players. But I mean, I don't think any of these series are going to be easy just based off of how long um, it's going to take for Joel Embiid to get back to completely full strength. I mean, he obviously looks good talent wise and everything, but there's a lot more factors along
I'm
with
going to have to.
stamina and how long he's going to be able to play. Because in the playoffs, it's one thing to expect a player to come back from injury and ease him in and have him play high 20 minutes and then upping that to the 30s. But now you're going to, in a quick, short period of time, ask him to play a high minutes, 35 plus minutes in a short period of time. So, and the Atlanta Hawks are getting better. They're going to get Trae Young back potentially for a play-in game. So, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
none of these
that.
games are going to be easy. But I will agree that the Magic are a favorable matchup for the Sixers. I'd rather play the Magic honestly right now probably than the Knicks.
Yeah, I would definitely rather play the Magic than the Knicks. I mean, like I've mentioned, the Magic are a young, unexperienced team, which in the playoffs, that's what you want to face. Versus the Knicks, who, you have Jalen Brunson, who has been there before, with the Dallas Mavericks, with the Knicks. And he's really turned it up this season. So the Magic, they don't worry me at all. But I'm not as worried about Joel Embiid in the playoffs because even let's say the Sixers for some reason, I mean, just for the sake of argument, were to only play Joel Embiid for 25 minutes in the series, each game in the series against the Magic. 25 minutes of Joel Embiid is a lot more than you'd think. I mean, this is a guy who against the Grizzlies, what did he put up? 30 points in 23 minutes, and then they didn't even need him for the fourth quarter. Granted, it was basically a G League Grizzlies team,
Hey,
but we've
that's what I'm
seen
saying.
him
We're
do
talking
this.
about a big
But
step up
we've
in
seen him
competition.
do this against playoff teams this season before getting injured. I mean, we've seen him go up against very competent playoff teams in the regular season, just absolutely blow the door off them and then take a rest in the fourth quarter. And the Magic kind of feel like that kind of team to me, where it's not even going to be a problem, really. I think maybe a playing game against the Hawks with Trae Young being back maybe worries me a bit. If it was a full series, I wouldn't be worried, but just one game kind of scares me almost no matter who they play, which is why I really want them to avoid the play-in tournament.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how far the Heat go because I think out of the playing teams right now that are slated, the Sixers and the Heat could actually have a path to going deep into the playoffs if they're able to gain momentum and if they have to play each other at some point, which wouldn't be likely right now in the way that things stand. But if they did have to
Well,
play each other,
if the season were to end today, they would face the Miami Heat in the first play-in tournament game, 7 versus 8. But the good thing is they've leapfrogged Miami. So as long as they win out, even if they win
I
out
feel
on
like that would be a lot of momentum that could be gained from that game, whichever team wins that game, because you're actually beating a quality playoff opponent that shouldn't probably be in
and
that position.
yeah, and then you're going right into the playoffs rather than having to play a second playing game. But what I was about to say is if the Sixers win out, even if they don't end up with the 6th seed from winning out, let's say the Pacers also win the games they need to win, then that assures that you still remain as the 7th seed, which means if you play the Miami Heat in the play-in game, then you have home court advantage. So that's huge, just moving up from 8 to 7, even if you don't make it all the way up to 6, is having home court advantage for that first play-in game to make it as the 7th seed. As it stands right now, the Sixers' final 3 games are the Pistons, the Magic, and the Nets. The only tough game there possibly is the Magic, but with Embiid on the court, I'm not really worried about
That'd
the
be
Magic.
interesting to if they somehow do leapfrog, they play the Magic, win their last 3 games, beat the Magic, and then have to play them in uh,
Yeah, that would be
Orlando to
something.
start the
But yeah,
series. That'd be very interesting.
so tomorrow night they play the Pistons. I obviously not worried about the Pistons for very obvious reasons. And then the Nets, I'm not too worried about. I
I
think this is
wonder
the
how if the
biggest
ramp up
season.
period really starts this week with Joel Embiid. If they're
Yeah,
gonna really start
I think this
ramping up
week
his
is
minutes
where
to
yeah,
get him.
I think this is where you got to ramp him up. Like at first, he came back, he played what 3 or 4 games, and they kind of really eased him into it, obviously. But now it's like, okay, playoffs are about to start. We need you back in
That's what I'm
peak.
saying. Like that was cute. Like it was nice to get you back and everything, but now we're gonna really need you to uptick your minutes and be able to play.
Yeah,
And the thing about him is he puts the same amount of effort in at both sides of the court. So it's not like he's just he can take breaks or do this, that, the other on one side or the other. Especially come playoff time, he's gonna play probably even more intense defense than he normally even
well,
plays, even with the effort that he normally gives. So.
did you see in that game against the Miami Heat? It was late in the fourth quarter. Terry Rozier had Embiid one-on-one on the perimeter, and Embiid stayed with him all the way and was able to get the stop on defense. I mean, not
Yeah,
only
that
can
doesn't
Embiid
surprise me
do
now. I
it,
mean, Joel
yeah,
Embiid is a top 5 defensive player in this league when he's healthy. It's
yeah, and
just a
that's the
lot of
thing
the
is
times
not
that he's,
only
it's just a wear and tear on his body from playing that hard on both sides of the ball. But that's why people even still give him the benefit of the doubt in the conversation about who the best player in the league is because of what he offers on both sides of the court. And he
yeah,
plays perimeter defense as well, too,
that's what I was
which
about to say. It's
it's
not
not his most
only
ideal situation, but he does play perimeter defense.
That's what I was about to say. It's not only is he doing it on both sides of the ball, but defensively, he's doing it inside and out. He's doing it in the post and on the. He's not like regularly going out there on the perimeter, but when he has to defend the perimeter, he's more than capable enough. Because even if you're a little bit quicker than him, he makes up for it with his size and reach. So I mean,
That's why
yes,
it's so interesting in what would happen in a playing game versus the Miami Heat because they have one of the premier centers in the league in Bam Adebayo who can play inside and out, and that would be a little bit more strain on Joel Embiid. And that's just a good matchup between 2 big men in general, which there isn't too many teams in the East at the top of the East that have a big man that can match up with Joel Embiid like that.
yeah, and just to take a look at the Pacers' remaining schedule, the team we need to leapfrog. I don't think theirs is as easy. They play Toronto on the road tomorrow night. Not anything too difficult, but definitely more difficult than the Detroit Pistons. Then following that, they play the Cavs on the road as well in Cleveland. That's definitely no easy game there. And then to wrap things up, they play the Atlanta Hawks. Now, I don't know if they're going to try and get Trae Young back, just a game before the playoffs, just to shake off the rust, kind of like what the Sixers have been doing with Embiid. But if that ends up being a game against Trae Young, then that's no easy win either. So, I don't know. Do you know off the top of your head if the Sixers and Pacers finish with the same record, who has the tiebreaker? I know we lost to the Pacers earlier this year. I remember a game losing to the Pacers, but I'm not fully sure.
I'm not sure how that would play out because I think it would have to also see how the remaining games play out between the conference record and other tiebreaker scenarios like that.
So the Sixers, they lost to the Pacers in January, and I remember them losing to them earlier in the season. So I think the Pacers are going to have to lose 2 games. Because if the Pacers go 2-1 the rest of the way and the Sixers win out, right, that ties the records. And I think the Pacers would have the tiebreaker. So I think we would need the Pacers to lose 2 games and the Sixers have to win out. I don't think it's impossible. I think with the final games the Pacers have, I think it's certainly a possibility. But that is the case. Or maybe if the Cavs, or the other possibility is that if the Cavs lose out, but they play the Grizzlies, Pacers, and then the Hornets, Cavs aren't losing out. So I think
Yeah,
they're going to have to
that's
rely.
probably not a likely scenario. But I mean,
And
one thing is a plus: the Sixers are on a tied league high 5-game winning streak, so they have been playing their best ball
and
and
that's
just got their best player back. So
and that's what's such a shame about it. Imagine winning out the final 8 games and you still can't escape the play-in tournament. I mean, it's still, like I said, getting the 7 seed is still a victory because you get that home court advantage against the Miami Heat. But
But it's not the same though as like not having Joel Embiid and being in that scenario because if you were a team that were going into the playoffs without Joel Embiid and they had to play in the play-in tournament, I'd be a lot more scared of having to rely on Tyrese Maxey. Not saying that he can't do it, but everybody and trying to rely on all the other players outside of Joel Embiid to get them in a play-in tournament, then to possibly get them back from injury. But now that they are hot right now, they could win out for the rest of the season. I think it is what it is at this point. If they make the play-in tournament, then cool. They'll either play against the Miami Heat, which will be a very good game, and get them ready for future playoff games. And if they lose that game for whatever reason, they got to win to get the 8th seed, and it's right back into Boston where their season ended last year. So I think there's some
well, yeah,
motivations.
you can't end up with the 8 seed from the play-in
Yeah, you
tournament.
really
If they
can't.
play Boston
It'll be a
round
short
1,
season.
it's wraps. It's wraps if they play Boston round 1. The season is over at that
You
point.
gotta
But
somehow like that's your best chance of somehow the Celtics getting worn down in series because they're almost a lock every single year to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and the Heat have
and they're a
been
lock
making it
every
there a
year to
lot
beat
as
the
well.
Sixers.
So it's between those 2 teams that have shown they're consistent enough to make it there. Obviously, the Bucks, but they look bad under Doc Rivers, and there's a bunch of like random stuff coming out about the like them holding players meetings, and it just seems like Doc just talks so much. Like he just loves to spew the negativity and what should be kept in the locker room. He just opens up his mouth and lets like the whole world know about it. It's just like unnecessary, and it puts like unnecessary strain and pressure onto his players.
Yeah, Doc is an absolute cancer. I'll just say it straight up. The Bucks were doing great before they fired their head coach and hired Doc, and ever since they've been an absolute dumpster fire. And it's not going to get any better come playoff time. We can tell you firsthand that it's not going to get any better come playoff time. In fact, it's going to get worse. And so, I was having this conversation with my brother the other day. He's saying, the 2 teams he's worried about in the East, that he feels are going to stop the Sixers from doing what they got to do are the Celtics and the Bucks. I wholeheartedly agree with the Boston Celtics, but the Milwaukee Bucks, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think I even remember trashing Doc Rivers on this podcast last week. As little confidence as I have in the Sixers, in the playoffs, I have even less confidence in Doc Rivers. He's just not going to be able to get it done.
I
If we
think
have
it's mostly going to come down to the players really just being on their A game and really being able to play.
You
The
could
Bucks
have
do have those
you
players
could
to
have
do
the
that, but
dream team out there. You could have the dream team out there. As long as Doc Rivers is your head coach, you're not winning anything. I don't care. You can have the dream team and then even throw in the international players who weren't on Team USA that year. You could throw Hakeem Olajuwon into the mix. It's not happening. They're not winning anything as long as Glenn Rivers is the head coach over there. Everything he touches turns to shit, and it's gonna happen again. I'm getting a little worked up. Let's
You are getting a little
transition.
worked up over here.
Let's
I mean,
transition into a lighter topic. That being an Italian American talking about here on the Paisan Sports podcast. Actually, a lot of people don't know she's Italian American because she has a Medagon last name, but her mother's Sicilian. She's half Sicilian. Of course, I'm talking about
kind of like
Caitlin
you.
Clark. It's an old joke. You've used that joke many times. It's a bad joke. It's a common joke. You're the one whose last name is Deal.
All right.
Anyway, Caitlin Clark, she's single-handedly brought attention to women's basketball. Something that like people over the past like few years have been fighting and clawing to do, getting people to try and watch women's basketball. The population has denied it. Nobody wanted to watch women's basketball, no matter how much you told us to. But Caitlin Clark comes flying in with her Steph Curry-like play. And all of a sudden, 18 million viewers on the women's national championship. She has brought life to women's basketball. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, it really hasn't changed how much I watch women's basketball, to be honest. That's not a negative comment because I used to just watch it casually to begin with. So it really hasn't changed how much I watched it. I definitely watch the games a little bit closer, but the amount of college women's basketball games, I mean, I'm somebody that just occasionally would watch them to begin with. So
Yeah, well,
I mean, the UConn runs back in the day. I'm not trying to take anything away from Caitlin Clark because I actually am a big fan of Caitlin Clark, and I think it's going to be very interesting. And I might even put a bigger microscope on the WNBA now that she's going into the WNBA and some of the players.
Listen,
there's a lot of sports. If you're a true
about to save the WNBA.
If you're really a true like 4-for-4 sport, which I don't watch hockey. So if we're talking like the four main sports, and between baseball, basketball, and football, especially when they cross over in the seasons and you have like football off-season stuff going on with the draft and free agency, and you have baseball starting up and you have the NBA season winding down, but also ramping back up with the playoffs coming on, it's a lot to handle. And I also watch a lot of MMA and UFC as well. So I find some time where there's a lot of stuff that I don't even get to watch. So.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that on a certain level. With all the basketball, football, and baseball that I watch, I mean, I try and also get around to watching the Philadelphia Union because that's my team, but a lot of times I don't get around to it. I still follow them and I keep up with everything, but tuning into every game while you already have so many other sports to watch definitely becomes a little bit difficult. But listen, back to Caitlin Clark. She is about to single-handedly save the WNBA. Okay, the WNBA has been struggling ever since its existence. They borrow money from the NBA every year. The NBA is what keeps them afloat. They struggle with attendance. Whenever the WNBA team that wins the championship, nobody shows up to the parade. It's really an unwatched program. But Caitlin Clark and the WNBA, I can tell you right now, and I'm sure there's many, 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 many people out there who can say the same as what I'm about to say, is that her first WNBA game, that's the first WNBA game I'm going to watch. And I'm definitely going to watch it. And it's going to be the first WNBA game I've ever watched. And I'm sure there's a ton of people out there who can say the same thing just because of Caitlin Clark. Because here's the thing about Caitlin Clark, right? People compare her to Steph Curry, but here's the difference between Caitlin Clark and Steph Curry is as great as Steph Curry is, he's not higher above the competition as Caitlin Clark. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, Steph Curry is a much better player than Caitlin Clark. If they were to face one-on-one, Steph would absolutely torture. But what I'm saying is, like Steph
What are
Curry.
you actually trying to say?
My point is, outside of Caitlin Clark, nobody can really touch her. She is just that much better than all the other women players. So it's like, okay, here I'm gonna put it like this. It's like if Steph Curry went back in time to 1950s NBA, right? That's Caitlin Clark in the WNBA in women's college basketball. That's Caitlin Clark. That's how much higher above the competition she is. And it's gonna be exciting to watch. I mean, she averaged 32 points per game in college. Who does that?
Yeah, well, I mean, she does shoot the ball a lot. She does have some good teammates as well, but she is a
She has
phenomenal
one.
player.
What's her name? Paige Buchers. I mean, I watched that game
She's
against
on
South.
UConn. That's who they
Oh,
beat. Yeah.
okay. Yeah. See, I don't really watch much of it. But yeah, I mean, I watched the game against South Carolina, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, Caitlin Clark is the only good player on this court. I'm sorry to say it about the rest of the players on Iowa, but I mean, I couldn't believe what I was watching. I went into the game with like, you know, only positive aspirations. And I'm watching other players on Iowa miss wide open mid range shots, missing layups, and then you have Caitlin Clark lighting it up from three. I don't know. I think
Yeah,
the
some of
rest
the
of the
times
team
that some of the shots that she takes at times are a little bit reckless, but she does have the spark that her team needs. Um, Really, there was a couple games. She didn't have a big game versus UConn. I think she only had 20 points or something like that. But it was like her 50 something, 28-point game in a row. So she's definitely a phenomenal player. I want to see how that translates to the next level with the step up in competition, like you said, in the collegiate level. South Carolina was the best overall team. They were undefeated for the year, and they had a lot of players. That they could cycle through. But Caitlin Clark was by far the best player that was out on the court. So
Yeah.
it's going to be
I
interesting to see her make that shift. The WNBA draft, I think, is what, April 15th.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
she's
it's
almost
coming
a
up
lock to go number one overall.
to the
The South
Indiana
Carolina center is going to
Fever.
be in the draft, Carduso, too. And there's some other players. I think Angel Reese is also eligible for that draft. A couple of her teammates from Iowa might see possibly get drafted as well, but Caitlin Clark should go number one. So it's going to be
She
very
will.
interesting to see how she translates to the professional level and how far she can take her stardom, and if she can really break down the barrier and be one of those people where she's as well known and she stays as relevant. She's not like one of those Jimmer Fredette cases, you know what I mean? Like
No,
a college
she
player that
yeah.
like
No,
Jimmer Fredette was that big. I thought you were about
she
to
was.
discredit like how like remember Jimmer Fredette, even a little bit less popular than him, but like Doug McDermott, like those type
Dougie
of guys that would kind of
McBuckets.
just flare out.
Yeah,
Even though
but
Doug
those are the
McDermott's been in the
guys
NBA
that
for a long time, but
yeah, but those guys you knew it was just gonna be a college thing for them. You knew it
Jimmer
was
Fredette was ridiculous. Pulling up from like half court, the run that he had in
yeah.
college.
Yeah, but you knew it wasn't really gonna translate to the NBA. Caitlin Clark, she's gonna be a star.
Do you
And
think
she
she
is
could?
gonna
Do
stay
you
there.
think she could honestly play in the NBA?
In the NBA, no, absolutely not. No.
No, not at all. Like she couldn't hold her own score.
Listen, if, watching that game against South Carolina, I think it became very evident that Caitlin Clark would not be able to play in the NBA. And I'll tell you why. Because the reason why South Carolina was able to dominate that game is just because they were bigger and stronger than Iowa. It,
Yeah,
it
they
was
were, but
really
their
that. It
core
wasn't
center
that
was
they were
speed.
more talented. It was because they were all very tall and strong, and they just absolutely abused Iowa on the boards. So, if you look at that being the big advantage and the reason why Iowa wasn't able to get it done, and then you think about, okay, the NBA, I mean, the NBA is much bigger and stronger than South Carolina. So, no, Caitlin Clark, no, she would not be able to get anything done in the NBA. However, I'm not sure if you heard, but Ice Cube offered Caitlin Clark $5 million to join the Big
Yeah.
Three League, which he's bringing back. Now, that I think she could get it done a bit on offense in the Big Three League. Because that's a bunch of 40-year-old retired players. It's 3-on-3, so it's a lot more spaced out, a lot less physical, which works to Caitlin Clark's advantage. I think she could get it done a bit on offense in the Big Three league. I mean, obviously she would get eaten for lunch on defense, but I think it would definitely be exciting to see her in the Big Three league, and I think she could definitely make some offensive contributions over there. The NBA, absolutely not.
Yeah, I don't think she's going to entertain the Big Three thoughts of or I think
She
she's going to
should.
more so.
What's she going to make in the WNBA? Like 400 grand?
Yeah, if that would be like the peak of popularity too. That's why I was saying it's going to be interesting to see if she can really break down the barriers and be that popular and famous of a WNBA player to not only bring eyes to the game but open up the path for bigger contracts and possibly more teams. And it sounds like a lot of pressure and weight on her shoulders, but I mean, she's been this popular of a player for that long. And it's funny because she might not even be the best player in college basketball. At the end of the day, Juju Watkins from USC is also absolutely ridiculous, the freshman from USC. So maybe she might break Caitlin Clark's records and maybe set a trend of just a whole new era. There was also, I forget the other girl basketball player that was like this big girl that was just posting people up and led her team on like a 20-point comeback in one of the tournament games and almost upset another highly ranked team. I forget who that was, but there's some good talent out there in women's basketball. But we had WrestleMania in Philadelphia this weekend. You mentioned it a little bit earlier this week, but real quickly, we had two famous Philadelphia Eagles players getting involved in WrestleMania. Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson ended up throwing, who was it? They threw Dom back into the ring.
Yeah, I think it was Dom Mysterio.
Dom Mysterio got thrown off their legendary son of the Rey Mysterio, who Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson were sporting Nacho Libre like masks, and they had Eagles logos on it.
Yeah, and Lane with the big Dom T-shirt. I forget what Jason Kelsey's T-shirt was, but it was also something. It was something like Philly Sports, along with like the WrestleMania type font. Said something Philly Sports, really. I forget. But how about Jason Kelsey hopping over the top rope to get in the ring?
I know. That was interesting to me. When I watched that video, I was like, damn, he looks like he should be playing a whole nother season in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, he's still in peak physical condition, and now he's just having fun out there now. He's just living a life.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be, salty about it or anything. It would be phenomenal with the additions in the offseason to have him back out there. I mean, I'm still holding out a glimmer of hope at some point that he just gets restless, not asking for an injury to the Eagles offensive line at all, but at some point that he gets restless off the couch and, just has to come play again, because that would just be phenomenal. And that wouldn't change any thoughts about, his retirement and the way that it happened or anything. But I think a lot of people think that it would, but they say that now, but would completely welcome him with open arms off the couch if he were to come back.
Let's creep. Anyway,
but his
what's your butt?
Former teammate Jordan Mailata just signed an extension with the Eagles through 2028.
Big extension, but hold on, before we get over to the Eagles, I did want to speak on just something with Philly sports in general regarding WrestleMania. Is this was a weekend of very, very high magnitude for the city of Philadelphia, for the sports complex. And it really, in my opinion, I think it was the first of many. WrestleMania was this weekend for 2026. They have the World Cup planned, along with the MLB All-Star Game. And I think, and now, of course, they're making renovations to the sports complex, adding a lot more to it, concert venue, hotels, the whole 9 yards. And I think this was like Philly's audition tape, right? To try and get more big events, right? They're already planning the renovations, trying to get more big events, but this was the audition. It was like, let's see how WrestleMania goes. Let's see what the crowd is like. Let's see all of that. And and they were really given the opportunity on the silver platter, because for those who don't really follow wrestling, the main event was basically, you had a guy, Roman Reigns, who held the title for 4 straight years. And then here comes Cody Rhodes, who had a family legacy behind him, trying to finish the story, as he says. And in the final main event, everybody came out. John Cena, The Undertaker. So it was like, let's see how the crowd reacts to this. Undertaker, that gong hits, that crowd lost their minds. So it's like, that's what you want to see. That's what I think possibly was a big reason WWE booked the WrestleMania in Philly, is because you want that Philly crowd, that famous, loud Philly crowd. So I think this was really our audition as a city to hold more big events. I think it went very well. We still have the World Cup and the MLB All-Star Game to come in a couple years, and I think it's going to lead to a lot more big events in the city of Philly from now on.
I agree. And we hosted the NFL draft a couple years back. That was a success.
Actually, I forgot about that, and that was a huge success as well. So, I mean,
and the NBA All-Star Game, I think, was what, 2001 or 2002 that they hosted it. So it's been quite some time.
Thing. Yeah, we
and
went about,
for like you said, I don't think it's anything to do with the crowds. I think that would be a selling point on why you should be able to go there. I think it just has a little bit more to do with like the versatility of the city and different events that they can plan there. But who knows? Like you said, WrestleMania is a pretty big event to have there, and they had it over a 2-day stretch of time. It wasn't just a one-night event; it was a 2-day.
Well, that's something they've been doing.
Event. And they held Raw's at Wells Fargo Center tonight.
Yeah, well, oh my God, yeah, I forgot all about that. But yeah,
and
so
then SmackDown was at Wells Fargo Center on Friday night, right?
So that's what they do every year with the WrestleMania, because while they're in the area, they do the SmackDown, they do the Monday Night Raw the following night. They did start doing the 2-day WrestleManias a couple of years ago. I think they first did it in Dallas, then they did it in LA last year, and now Philly. But it also shows a lot about Philly being a destination for these big events. Is WWE has always done WrestleMania in a warm climate or in a domed stadium, right? As I mentioned, Dallas, LA. I stopped watching wrestling for years, so the only other city I can think of is Orlando for WrestleMania 24, the very first WrestleMania event I ever watched. But to be able to get WrestleMania without being in a warm climate and have wrestlers out there in 50-degree weather, as they did on Saturday night, I think it even dropped below 50. That's a big deal. That really shows that this city is a big destination for big events. And yeah, I forgot all about the NBA draft a few years ago. So yeah, they went from
NFL draft, yeah.
What I say, NBA?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2001, that was the last time we had anything in this city, was the All-Star game, the NBA All-Star game, right? Then they had nothing up until the NFL draft, and it went so well. And now finally you're seeing big events in Philly. So I think it's very exciting. But
I think baseball would be really cool for baseball to come here. I mean, it would be a decent time of year. It won't be probably too hot in July to make it over here. And I think it would be a great city, and there's a lot of baseball history in this city. So I think that would be, something that the MLB should really look into.
Well, no, that they are doing that. The MLB All-Star Game 2026.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why, that's like they should have already done that in the years past.
Yeah.
I mean, Citizens Bank Park is one of the premier stadiums, I would say, in the entire
It's definitely
league.
top 5 for sure, if not top 3. I would put Orioles Park ahead of it. And honestly, without actually going to other ballparks, just from what I see and hear about them, I think Orioles Park might be really the only ballpark you can really put ahead of CBP. maybe where the St. Louis Cardinals play. I don't know why I'm blanking on that ballpark, but
That's Busch Stadium, isn't it?
Busch Stadium, yeah, of course. Coors Field's also nice. Fenway's iconic.
Yeah, I was about to say Fenway.
Yeah, but Fenway's just iconic in terms of quality of ballpark. CBP is definitely leaps and bounds over Fenway. Fenway's just much more iconic.
Fenway aesthetically is just by far just the most interesting and best stadium in the
Yeah,
entire NBA.
but functionally speaking, not the best. I mean the seats in down the first baseline, they don't face home plate. They're just pointed directly at the outfield. It's then you got chairs that are behind poles. It's a rusted stadium. Look, I've always been dying to go to Fenway, but in terms of functionality, I'm giving it to CBP all the way. Plus, with CBP, you get Ashburn Alley in terms of functionality. You get Ashburn Alley. You can walk around Ashburn Alley while still peeking out at the game. It's much more.
You can heckle the pitchers a little bit too when you're walking by.
Yeah, it's much more walkable. It's more open. Fenway's definitely way more iconic, but I gotta give the edge to CBP. Anyway, we were of course talking about Jordan Mailata getting a big extension. I know you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, just briefly bring up the news of that. They also brought back the Eagles did Avonte Maddox after cutting him earlier in this offseason. So keeping two guys that have been on the roster for years and have been productive. Jordan Mailata has gone from an undrafted player into one of the best left tackles in the entire game. And I thought it was interesting to see that before a Devontae Smith extension, but I think Howie knows how to take care of all of his players. And Avonte Maddox, that just brings another guy that knows the role and could fill possibly the nickel role. And that means probably Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's going to play more traditional safety instead of the rumors about him being more so of a nickel than a safety when he first signed. So it's just going to be interesting to see. Keeping two guys, like I said, with a lot of familiarity with the Eagles. So,
Yeah,
not the biggest news in the world, but
the only thing that worries me about the Avonte Maddox signing, which we talked about last week, we were worried about James Bradbury, hoping he would just end up playing the nickel. Now that Maddox is back, I'm hoping this doesn't mean James Bradbury is going to be the outside corner for the Eagles, the second outside.
Well, I think I think it would just be crazy to think that they would go with Slay, Maddox, and Bradbury as their starters. I think Kelee Ringo makes his way in there somehow, and Isaiah Rodgers even
really
too.
hope so.
So
Yeah.
the way that they sign back Avonte Maddox, maybe he doesn't even make the roster. I don't think they're going to cut James Bradbury, especially that late into the picture. I think they would have already done it unless they're keeping it under wraps that they're going to end up doing it soon. But I just don't think that's going to happen. So Avonte Maddox isn't even, a lock to make this roster. It's just somebody that has a lot of familiarity. But also with being with the Eagles beforehand and signing back there, maybe his expectation is maybe he might not start. And it's also somebody that they cross-trained at safety before. So maybe he can also play into their safety depth as well.
Yeah, well, anyway, before we move on from this topic, it is time for my meatball of the week.
Yes,
and now there's not really anybody too crazy for meatball of the week this week. But somebody who is my meatball of the week, not to backtrack back to WrestleMania, but my meatball of the week is Meek Mill. And not for the other stuff, not all that, just from the clip from WrestleMania of him videoing The Rock and yelling, "Get up!" So he went viral.
A lot of people were getting all over him for that, but I guess it's better for them to talk about that than some of the other things that are going on.
Yeah, let's not get into that. Let's stay away.
You can save that for another podcast.
Let's save it for no podcast.
Yeah, we'll save it for an unreleased podcast that we'll do. But we talked about all the other teams in Philadelphia doing well, so let's give a little update on the Philadelphia Phillies. And they're currently sitting at 4-5 right now. I believe they're leading in the game that they're playing right now versus St. Louis Cardinals, the first game of that series. The live update, they're winning in the bottom of the ninth, 3-1.
Well, there we
And they're
go.
4-5 on the season. So expectations, they couldn't sweep the Washington Nationals. They ended up losing 3-2 on Sunday when they were going for the sweep. How do you assess them? The Cardinal series is now their fourth series of the year. Where do you assess them at as of right now? Are you overreacting? Are you taking it at only 10 games into a 162 game season? What do you think about the bullpen, the lineup? Where are you at, Dante?
Um, so I'm not really too far on either side with it. I'm not like overly worried. We are 10 games into the season, and this is how they've started the season for 3 straight seasons. You saw how far they made it the past 2 after a very slow start. But at the same time, I'm tired. I'm tired of these slow starts every year. It is becoming exhausting. Um, and the other thing too is outside of just looking at the record, the things that have been going wrong have been very, very frustrating to watch. Johan Rojas's lack of production on offense seemed to be said about Trey Turner, as well as his lack of ability on defense as of late. Nick Castellanos, it's been, and the funny thing too is I talked about previously before the season started. I said the offense is going to be great, but I'm worried about the pitching. It's been the opposite. Outside of the first series, the pitching was god awful. Granted, it was against the Atlanta Braves. But ever since the Braves series, the pitching has been really good. The pitching was terrific against the Marlins. It was great pitching.
Nationals.
The Nationals, yeah, I don't know why I blanked out for a second on that, but the pitching was terrific against the Nationals. Each starter put in a very good performance. The bullpen was pretty solid. The series before that, the pitching wasn't bad at all. Tonight, they've only given up 1 run against the Arizona Card. I mean, what is up with me tonight? I just said the Arizona.
The Arizona Cardinals are switching sports on us real quick. The St. Louis Cardinals. So
But
so
yeah,
far, Dante, if you want to just break it
Spencer
down easily,
Turnbull.
they played the
Spencer,
Braves. Second series was the Reds. Third series was the Nationals. This is the fourth series versus the Cardinals.
yeah, and Spencer Turnbull, a guy who I had no confidence in going into the season, he pitched 6 innings, allowing only 2 hits, no runs, and notching 6 strikeouts.
And
After
he didn't allow any runs in his first outing either.
1 run, he pitched 5 innings, gave up 1 run, only 3 hits. So between his first 2 outings this season, he's pitched 11 innings, given up 5 hits, and 1 earned run. He's been terrific so far. I think the pitching has looked. It's mainly the starting rotation. Although, I mean, you've had guys out of the bullpen like Jose Alvarado and Jeff Hoffman who have pitched well out of the bullpen. I think the pitching has really surprised me. It's looked a lot better than I thought. Christopher Sanchez, he's looked good as
The
well.
offense has just been dry, though. They just really
The
haven't given
offense has been brutal. The only 2 guys who I think look good are Kyle Schwarber. Schwarber's had an excellent start to the season, and Bryce Harper. Outside of that,
Bryce just turned it around too. He had
yeah,
that 3 home run game, which was absolutely ridiculous. Just the type of stardom that he just presents. It just almost seems like the aura of Bryce Harper at times is just like astronomical, and he just comes up so clutch. And it's almost like he hits that first home run, first hit of the season, then he hits another one, and then with the bases loaded that he's going to come up and get another big hit. And he should have had a double in that game as well. That was a snagging grab from the center fielder. So he almost went 4 for 5 in that game. And he's gotten his batting average up since. But,
it was
they're just not
Johan
providing a lot of runs,
Rojas
and they're not
who
really.
delivered the run for the Phillies tonight. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just
No,
checking
you're
into.
good. It's just like the top of their order situationally, they're not like really producing as a whole. It's not like Kyle Schwarber has gotten on and then Trey Turner's able to hit him home or scenarios like that. It's kind of more so of them doing it solely and maybe hitting solo home runs and stuff like that. And Trey
Okay,
Turner just really hasn't gotten going at
I'm gonna
all.
have to stop you there because while you're saying that, I'm gonna read you the box score, the batting lines for the Phillies tonight. So Kyle Schwarber 0 for 5, not even a walk. Trey Turner is 3 for 4 with an RBI. Bryce Harper 0 for 3 with a walk. Alec Bohm 0 for 3 with a walk. Bryson Stott 0 for 4. Costi 0 for 4. Brandon Marsh, actually, that's another guy I forgot to mention. Shout out Brandon Marsh. He's had an excellent start to the season as well. He's 2 for 4 with 2 runs scored. Off of, and a solo home run, it looks like. Garrett Stubbs is 1 for 4 with a run scored, and Johan Rojas is 3 for 4 with an RBI. So I just wanted to cut you off as you were talking trash on Trey Turner, rightfully so, however, but he is 3 for 4 today with an RBI. So the two most unlikeliest of guys, the two
They
who
just
are,
haven't put it together. They've had guys just have big games and multi-hit games and 3-run games, but nobody through a consistent sequence of their batting order
yeah.
has really been able to get going. So that's what maybe it's a good thing that that's the case and they're still winning games, but I don't know if they're going to be able to do that against the hierarchy of the league. Even though the Cardinals are a decent team, they're not one of the better, more above average teams, especially in the National League.
Yeah. Johan Rojas also had a diving catch to end the first inning. So he's definitely having a heck of a game. The other thing I do want to talk about before we end things here, I think I mentioned maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe last week, that JT Realmuto is out of his prime now. One thing that needs to be mentioned is it used to be watching the Phillies games. You saw a guy trying to steal second, you weren't worried at all because you knew JT was going to throw him out. JT this year, he's not been able to throw anybody out. I mean, he's looked bad in that term behind the
Or was it
plate.
the was it Lane Thomas on the Nationals that got like 3 or 4 or 5 stolen bases versus the Phillies the other day?
Yeah, it was something egregious like that. But yeah, I think JT Realmuto is the second most it has given up the second most steals in baseball this season, if I'm not mistaken. He not only, last year, you really felt like his offense wasn't what it used to be anymore, while his defense was still pretty decent. He wasn't that elite defender, he didn't have that elite arm behind the plate as we were used to seeing, but he was still pretty good. This year, it has not looked good. And I think that's a real concern, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's gonna be, something that maybe he can improve on. He's just a little rusty, to begin the season. He usually gets in, like, rough patches at certain parts of seasons, and then he gets really hot. His bat's, batting pretty good. I think he's batting, like, 300 at the moment, and he's batting in that cleanup role. But, defensively, that's something that we thought, would always be there, and it's a little bit concerning that he's not able to throw people out. And there was more so the intimidation factor before where you didn't even want to try to steal on him because of how successful he was, but that might not be the case anymore. You can't have it all the entire playing career. So hopefully it's just a thing where it's more so of a rusty thing and he gains a little of that back throughout the season because that could be crucial come playoff time.
Yeah, and because not only is it not good that you're not throwing out the runners that you used to throw out, but then you become the target, as like to what
Yeah.
you're saying. Then teams are going to start running on you because they feel they can get away with it, and then it becomes a legit problem because now you're giving up a lot more steals than you would have, and
And then you're just going to have more scenarios with runners in scoring position. And that was almost talked about. That was just something that was never even talked about with the Phillies. Because it was never an issue because that's a big reason why they traded for JT was his defensive prowess.
Yeah, so let's hope this doesn't turn into a bigger issue. Let's hope JT gets it going. And just real quick, just to check in again before we end things.
Yeah, the Cardinals
There's
actually scored a run, but there's
uh,
2 outs in the ninth inning. So,
all right. Well, let's end this podcast.
actually, the game is now tied.
Oh, come on.
3-3.
And I was just complimenting Jeff Hoffman. And he's on the mound for this nonsense.
Yeah, we also didn't mention that also this week Connor
Wow.
Brogdon got sent out via trade. They were done with the Connor
thank God.
Brogdon experience. So, I mean,
Thank
I never was a big Connor Brogdon fan to begin with, and I think they had it after that Reds grand slam that he gave up.
All right, well, let's end this podcast, catch the end of this Phillies game. Hopefully they pull it out. We were just talking some good about them, and now here they go. So to everybody watching, we're about to end the podcast on a very negative note because now I am very negative. So thanks for tuning in, though.
Yes, sir. We'll be back next week, and we'll have more with updates around the Philadelphia sports world.
Yep. See you guys.